The story of my grandfather's dusty cottage begins on a day I will never forget. The day the lawyer called me. I was sitting at my kitchen table, half asleep, sipping bitter coffee when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, but something about that unfamiliar number made me pick up. "Is this Daniel?" The voice asked. "Yes, this is Mr. Whitaker, your grandfather's attorney. I believe we need to meet. There's something you should know about his estate." For a moment, my heart froze. My grandfather had been gone for nearly 6 months. I thought everything regarding his will was already settled. My cousins had fought over money, my uncles had bickered over furniture, and my grandmother had been left broken, grieving in silence. I assumed I wasn't in the will at all. After all, my grandfather and I hadn't spoken much in the last few years. Yet here was this lawyer, summoning me like there was unfinished business. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought of my grandfather, the way his stern gray eyes used to watch me when I was a child, as though he was testing me, measuring whether I was worthy of something I couldn't yet understand. The next morning, I drove into the city and climbed the creaky stairs of Whitaker & Sons law office, a place that smelled like dust, old wood, and secrets. Inside, Mr. Whitaker sat behind a mountain of papers. He was an elderly man himself, his spectacles balancing on the edge of his nose. "Daniel," he said warmly, "thank you for coming. Your grandfather was a complicated man, but he left something behind for you." I raised an eyebrow. "Something?" "I thought everything was already divided." Whitaker smiled faintly. "Not everything." From a drawer, he pulled out a heavy envelope sealed with red wax. On the front, in my grandfather's unmistakable sharp handwriting, were 2 words: "For Daniel." My throat tightened. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a letter. "Daniel, if you are reading this, it means my time in this world is done. I have left you something. Not money, not jewelry, not stocks or bonds. Something older. Something the rest of the family would not understand. You must go to the cottage. You remember the one, on the edge of Marrow Hill, where the oaks grow twisted and the air always seems heavy. It is yours now. Do not let the others have it. There are things inside that belong only to you. Be careful. Some truths should never see the light of day, but some must. You'll know the difference when the time comes. Grandfather." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Along with the letter, he left the cottage in your name. No one else even knows." "It was his specific request." "The cottage?" I whispered, memories flooding back. I had visited it once as a child. It was more of a ruin than a home, hidden away behind overgrown weeds and towering trees. Dark, drafty, smelling of mold and time. My cousins had laughed at it. They called it the haunted house. "Yes," Whitaker said. "Keys are here." He slid a rusty ring of iron keys across the table. He was very insistent you would one day understand why. I stared at the keys. They were cold, heavy, and ancient, as though they belonged not to a cottage, but to a castle. When I left the office, my mind was racing. Why me? Why the cottage? And what could possibly be so important under those rotting beams and broken windows? My cousins, when they heard, didn't even hide their laughter. "You got the cottage?" My cousin Peter scoffed. "The place that smells like death? Congratulations, Daniel. Enjoy your inheritance of dust and cobwebs." The others chuckled. They had their money, their jewelry, their cars. I had an abandoned shack on Marrow Hill, but I couldn't shake the weight of my grandfather's letter. He hadn't written it lightly. He hadn't chosen me at random. Something was waiting in that cottage. 3 days later, I stood at the edge of Marrow Hill, staring up at the crooked roof and sagging windows. The place looked like it was exhaling rot. The shutters flapped loosely in the wind. A crow sat on the roof, cawing like it was mocking me. I almost turned back. Almost. But then I remembered my grandfather's words. There are things inside that belong only to you. I stepped forward, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. The key in my pocket felt like it was burning against my skin. The door groaned as I unlocked it. The hinges shrieked in protest, as though they hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the cottage was worse than I imagined. Dust blanketed everything. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like curtains. The floor creaked under every step, threatening to collapse. But there was something else. A smell. Not just mold and decay. Something metallic. Something like blood. I froze, my hand tightening around the key. And then, faintly, I heard it. A sound. A thump, coming from beneath the floorboards that my breath caught. I knelt, pressing my ear to the wooden planks. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, another thump. Soft. Hollow. Someone or something was down there. My skin prickled. My grandfather's words echoed again in my head. Some truths should never see the light of day, but some must. I pulled away, my heart pounding, staring at the floor as though it might break open and swallow me whole. Whatever was beneath those boards, it was waiting, and I was meant to find it, and that's where I'll leave you. For now, would you dare open those floorboards if you were me? Tell me in the comments below, what do you think is hidden beneath the cottage floor? Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment so you don't miss Chapter 2, where the floorboards reveal their first terrifying secret. Asterisk, before I dive in, let me remind you, if you're enjoying this mysterious journey into my grandfather's past, don't forget to subscribe to Grandfather True Story. Click the like button to support these stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement keeps these hidden tales alive, and believe me, this one is about to get even darker. The second morning in my grandfather's cottage felt heavier than the first. The air was dense, as if the old walls themselves were reluctant to breathe. I woke on the creaky bed, surrounded by peeling wallpaper patterned with roses long faded to gray. Every sound of the housewood expanding, nails groaning, the faint drip of water from some unseen pipe felt deliberate, almost as though the house was speaking in a forgotten tongue. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, replaying the dreams that had haunted me all night. They weren't ordinary dreams. I had seen my grandfather's face, but not the smiling, familiar face from childhood. No, his expression was grave, shadowed by secrets. He stood in a dark room, pointing at the ground. The dream had been so vivid that when I woke, I half expected to see a mark on the floorboards by my bed. The cottage was full of questions, but I knew one thing for certain. My grandfather had left this place for me for a reason, and that reason lay hidden somewhere inside these walls. I descended the narrow staircase into the sitting room, its windows draped in heavy curtains that filtered the morning light into somber streaks. Dust floated in the air like ancient spirits refusing to leave. On the mantelpiece sat a row of items that once seemed ordinary, but now carried weight: a cracked teacup, a rusted pocket knife, and an old family photograph with my grandfather's face half shrouded by shadow. I walked slowly across the creaking floor, and something peculiar happened. A hollow sound echoed under my foot. Not the dull thud of solid wood, but the distinct drum of a cavity beneath. I froze. My heart began to pound in my chest, my breath shallow. I pressed my foot again. Thump. Hollow. The dream of my grandfather pointing at the floor resurfaced with an uncanny chill. Could it have been more than a dream? I dropped to my knees, brushing aside the faded rug. Dust burst into the air, coating my throat with a bitter taste. The floorboards revealed themselves darkened with age, but one of them had a faint groove at the edge, like it had been lifted before. With trembling fingers, I pulled a small knife from my pocket and wedged it into the groove. The wood resisted at first, But then, with a reluctant creak, it began to lift. The smell that escaped was earthy, metallic, and old like a grave unearthed. Beneath the board was a narrow cavity, and in it lay something wrapped in burlap. My pulse quickened as I tugged at the coarse fabric, revealing a glint of iron chain. My hands shook. It wasn't just a bundle. It was a chest, small, wooden, its corners reinforced with rusted iron brackets and secured by a heavy, tarnished lock. The sight of it stole the breath from my lungs. This is it, I whispered to myself. The chest was no bigger than a shoebox, but its presence filled the entire room. I could almost feel the weight of my grandfather's gaze upon me. Friends, can you imagine being in my shoes, finding a locked chest beneath your grandfather's floorboards, in a house full of secrets? What do you think is inside? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget, if you're hooked by this mystery, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Believe me, the secret is only beginning to unfold. I carried the chest to the table and set it down with a heavy thud. The lock was thick, the kind forged in another century. I tugged at it, but it held fast, mocking me. The chest wasn't just a container. It was a riddle. My grandfather had always been a man of riddles. He never answered questions directly, always weaving lessons into stories, expecting me to listen between the lines. I remembered one such story now, one he told me when I was only 10 years old. Sometimes the greatest treasures are not given, but earned. And sometimes they're not gold at all, but truth itself. Truth that others feared to keep, and so I held it. At the time, I hadn't understood. But now, staring at the chained chest, those words returned with terrifying clarity. I searched the cottage for a key. Every drawer, every shelf, every pocket of dust was turned inside out. Nothing. It was as if the lock itself dared me to give up. Hours passed, but the chest remained closed. Exhaustion set in, but I refused to stop. Something about it compelled me. It was more than curiosity. It was destiny. Finally, as dusk descended and the room filled with long shadows, I slumped into a chair, the chest before me like a silent adversary. That's when I noticed something carved faintly into the wood. At first glance it looked like scratches, but under the flicker of my lantern, I realized they formed letters. My heart skipped. I traced the faint carving with my fingers. Look beneath. What is buried deeper still? The message was unmistakably my grandfather's hand. I leapt from the chair, adrenaline surging. This chest wasn't the only secret. It was a clue, pointing me deeper into the house. The floorboards creaked as I moved across the room, lantern in hand, searching for another hollow sound. My ears strained for that subtle drum. And then, near the fireplace, I heard it again. I dropped to my knees and pulled at the boards, prying them loose one by one. Beneath was a narrow tunnel, just wide enough to crawl through, descending into darkness. A draft rose from it, cold and damp, carrying with it a scent of earth and something older, something forgotten. I hesitated at the edge, lantern trembling in my grasp. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to leave the past buried. But another voice, my grandfather's voice, echoed in my head. The truth is never safe, but it must be faced. Swallowing hard, I lowered myself into the tunnel. The earth closed around me, damp and suffocating, my lantern casting trembling shadows against dirt walls. I crawled deeper, each movement echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. And then, ahead, I saw an underground chamber. The chamber was small, circular, and lined with stone. In the center was another chest larger, more ancient, bound with iron straps. Unlike the first, this one wasn't locked. Its lid sat slightly ajar, as though waiting for me. I pushed it open, my breath catching. Inside were letters, bundles of them, yellowed with age and tied with fraying ribbon. Each bore my grandfather's handwriting, hands trembling. I picked up the first letter and began to read. To the one who finds this, know that you are not the first to seek the truth, but you may be the last to endure it. Within these letters lies a history that was never meant to be spoken aloud, a truth that will bind or break you. I entrust it now, for I cannot carry it any longer, my eyes blurred with tears. These were his confessions, his secrets, his truth. But before I could read further, a sound echoed behind me. A faint, deliberate click. I froze. Someone else was in the tunnel. And that's where I'll stop for now, because what happened next still gives me chills to this day. Who was behind me in that tunnel? What did my grandfather's letters truly contain? And why was this secret buried so deep? If you're desperate to know, make sure you subscribe right now. Hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and drop your guesses in the comments below. Do you think the person in the tunnel was family? Or a stranger guarding the secret? Trust me, in the next chapter, the truth will get darker than you ever imagined. Before we dive in, let me remind you, if you've been following this mysterious journey, don't forget to subscribe to Grandfather True Story. Hit the like button and drop a comment about what you think is hiding in this dark cottage tale. Your support helps uncover the rest of the secrets, and in this chapter, things are about to take a chilling turn. A sound of the click echoed in the tunnel like a gunshot in my chest. I froze, clutching the bundle of letters in my trembling hands, the lantern's light flickering violently as though it too sensed the presence of another. The air grew colder. The silence stretched until I felt it pressing against my skull, louder than any noise. Slowly, I turned toward the tunnel's entrance. At first, I saw nothing, just shadows swallowing shadows. But then, a figure emerged, crawling slowly, deliberately. A man, tall and lean, his face hidden in the dim. "Who's there?" I demanded, though my voice cracked with fear. The figure stopped moving. His breathing filled the narrow passage, ragged, deliberate. Then, in a voice deep and gravelly, he said, "You weren't supposed to find this." My heart thundered in my ears. The letters in my hands suddenly felt like contraband, as if holding them was a crime. "Who are you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. The man crawled forward into the light. His face came into view, lined with age, scarred across the cheek, his eyes a piercing blue that carried both fury and sorrow. His clothes were old, almost ragged, like he had been living in places far from the sun. "I knew your grandfather," he said flatly, "and he never wanted you to be the one to uncover this." The lantern's glow trembled across his face, revealing something both human and spectral. He looked like a ghost dragged back into flesh. "You knew him?" I asked, stepping back, my shoulders hitting the stone wall of the chamber. Who are you to him?" He smiled, but it wasn't kindness. It was a bitter twist of the mouth. "I was his brother." The words knocked the air from my lungs. "A brother?" My grandfather never once mentioned having a brother. In all the family tales, in every story he told, there was silence about such a man. "You're lying," I whispered. The man shook his head slowly. "No, I am the shadow he kept hidden. The other half of the truth he buried. And now you've pried it open." He glanced at the letters in my hand. "Give them to me." I clutched them tighter. "No, they're mine now." "He left them for me?" His eyes darkened. "He left them to destroy you, just like he destroyed me." Friends watching this, imagine being in that underground chamber, face to face with a stranger who claims to be your grandfather's secret brother. What would you do? Hand him the letters or hold on to them at any cost? Let me know your answer in the comments, and if this moment has you on edge, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. The man stepped closer, the earth crunching under his boots. He was real. Too real. Why should I believe you? I asked, my voice steadier this time. He pointed at the chest, then at one of the letters. Open the second bundle, the one tied with black ribbon. You'll see. My hands shook as I set the lantern down and pulled at the fraying ribbon of the second bundle. The first letter was addressed not to me, but to a name I'd never heard before, to Samuel. I looked up sharply. The man's gaze was fixed on me. That's me, he said. My stomach nodded. My grandfather had written to him. The letters were proof. I opened the page, my eyes scanning the faded ink. Samuel, I never wanted it to end this way. But you forced my hand. What we did, what we buried, must never surface. If anyone learns the truth, it will consume them as it consumed us. Forgive me, though I know you never will. The words swirled before my eyes. My grandfather had indeed known this man, had written to him. I looked up. What truth? What did you bury? Samuel's lips curled. You really want to know? Then you'll have to walk the same road we did. And it begins with those letters. But once you read them all, there's no going back. He stepped closer. His shadow stretched over me, over the chest, over the letters. But maybe that's what your grandfather wanted for the burden to pass to you. For you to carry the curse. The chamber felt smaller now, suffocating. My mind raced. If he was my grandfather's brother, why had no one spoken of him? What curse bound them both? And why was it left for me? Before I could ask, Samuel reached for the bundle of letters. Instinctively, I pulled back. His eyes hardened. You don't understand what you're holding. Those letters can ruin you, just like they ruined me. We stared at each other in the trembling lamplight, two heirs of secrets neither of us fully grasped. Then, without warning, Samuel turned and began to climb back through the tunnel. Where are you going? I demanded. To prepare, he muttered. Because once you start reading, you'll come looking for me. And with that, his shadow disappeared into the tunnel. I was left alone in the chamber, the chest open, the letters trembling in my hands. I sank to the ground, lantern flickering, and began to read. Letter after letter spilled a story I could scarcely comprehend, a story of betrayal, of hidden wealth, of something buried not just beneath the cottage, but beneath the soil of our family itself. My grandfather and Samuel had once stood together, but something had driven them apart. Something so terrible that it demanded silence for generations. The words blurred as my heart pounded. One phrase repeated itself over and over, different letters, like a mantra. The floorboards hide more than wood. I froze. I had thought the letters were the secret. But no, this was only the beginning. Somewhere in this cottage, beneath more boards, more layers of dust, was something greater. Something my grandfather had fought to keep hidden, even from his own blood. And Samuel knew. I folded the letters carefully, my hands numb. I knew what I had to do. I had to dig deeper. I had to tear this cottage apart board by board, until I found what they had both buried. But as I crawled back into the sitting room, chest and letters in tow, I felt it again, a sensation of being watched. My eyes darted to the window dot in the glass. Faintly reflected by the moonlight, I saw a silhouette standing outside. Tall, motionless, watching. And that's where Chapter 3 ends, my friends. Who was standing outside that window? Was it Samuel again, or someone else entirely? And what do you think lies deeper beneath those floorboards? Comment your theories below. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandfather True Story. Hit that like button, and share this journey with others who love a good mystery. Because trust me, in the next chapter, the truth gets darker, and the house reveals something none of us were ready for. Asterisk, before we unravel this next chapter, let me remind you, if you've been gripped by this mysterious story so far, don't forget to subscribe to Grandfather True Story. Like this video and leave your thoughts in the comments. Your theories and support help us dig deeper into the secrets of this old cottage. And trust me, tonight's discovery will send chills down your spine. The moon hung heavy above the cottage, pale and merciless. Its light poured through the cracked window panes, framing the shadow that lingered outside. My breath caught, and for a moment, I could neither move nor speak. The silhouette didn't stir. It stood there as though carved from the night itself, watching me through the fragile glass. "Samuel?" I whispered, though something deep inside told me it wasn't him. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if mocking my fear. Then, in an instant, it vanished, melted into the darkness of the trees. I stumbled back, clutching the letters tighter, my chest rising and falling like a drumbeat. Whoever it was, they had been close enough to see everything. The chest, the letters, my every move. I knew then I wasn't alone in this search. I tried to steady my mind, but the words from my grandfather's letters echoed like a haunting refrain. The floorboards hide more than wood. I lowered myself to the wooden planks beneath my feet. The cottage was silent, except for the distant groan of timber settling in the night. My lantern's glow trembled over the warped boards, and I began tapping them one by one, searching for a hollow sound. Tap, solid, tap. Thunk. My heart skipped. There it was, a note that sounded different, lighter, as if something beneath was waiting. I pressed my fingers into the seam between the boards. Dust filled my nails, splinters tore my skin, but I pulled until the wood cracked free. Beneath lay a cavity. Not empty, a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, stained by time. I pulled it out, trembling as if holding a live animal. The cloth peeled away with effort, revealing another box. Smaller than the chest, but heavier, darker. Carved into its surface were initials, S.W. and H.W. Samuel Wright. Henry Wright, my grandfather, and his brother. Inside this box, I felt, lay the heart of their secret. I reached for the latch, but before I could open it, a sound split the silence, a creak from the hallway. Someone was inside the cottage. Imagine this moment. You've just uncovered a hidden box under the floorboards, proof of a family secret, and suddenly you hear footsteps in your supposedly empty house. What would you do? Hide? Confront them? Or run? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this chapter has your heart racing, hit that like button and subscribe, because it's about to get even darker. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. They moved across the hallway like someone who already knew the layout of the cottage. Lantern shaking in my hand, I slipped the small box into my satchel and crept toward the corner of the sitting room, pressing myself against the wall. The handle of the door turned. The door opened. And Samuel stepped inside. His eyes locked on mine instantly, sharp and knowing. "You found it," he said. His voice was low, almost reverent. I said nothing. My satchel pressed heavy against my hip. "I told you the floorboards spoke," he continued. "And now you've uncovered the one thing we swore to bury forever. What's inside?" I asked, my voice thin but demanding. Samuel's gaze flicked to my satchel, then back to me. His expression darkened. "Something that will make you curse the day you open this cottage." He stepped closer, his boots creaking against the wood. "Give it to me, now." My grip tightened on the satchel strap. "Not until you tell me what's in it." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Samuel's eyes. Real fear. "If you open that box, you'll bring ruin not only on yourself, but on everyone tied to our bloodline. That's why Henry sealed it away. That's why I stayed hidden all these years. We weren't protecting ourselves. We were protecting you." The air thickened. My grandfather, the man I admired, had been hiding something so dark it terrified even his estranged brother. "What's inside?" I repeated, my voice stronger. Samuel shook his head slowly. "Not tonight." You're not ready. He moved toward the door, his shadow spilling across the floorboards. But soon you'll wish you'd left it buried. With that, he vanished into the night once more, leaving me alone with the box and 1,000 questions tearing at my mind. I sat for hours, staring at the latch. My fingers itched to open it, yet Samuel's words clung to me like chains. If you open it, you'll bring ruin. But ruin or not, I knew one thing. I couldn't stop now. Whatever was inside, my grandfather had wanted me to discover it. Otherwise, why leave the clues? As dawn crept through the curtains, I made my decision. I placed the box on the table, set the lantern beside it, and whispered to the silence, "Grandfather, forgive me." My fingers pressed against the latch dot. The box clicked open dot and inside. That's where chapter 4 ends. What do you think was inside the mysterious box, carved with both brothers' initials? Was it money? Evidence of a crime? Or something far darker? Share your theories in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Grandfather True Story. Hit like and ring the bell so you don't miss chapter 5. Because what's inside that box will change everything. Asterisk, the wooden box sat heavy in my trembling hands. My fingers dug into its edges as though I were afraid it might vanish if I let go. The chamber around me seemed to shrink with every breath, the damp air pressing close, the flicker of my lantern bending shadows against the stone walls. The box was older than anything I had ever seen in my grandfather's collection, its wood weathered, almost fossilized. Strange markings ran along the lid, symbols that looked half-burned, half-carved, like fire had tried to erase them, but they refused to die. I hesitated. I had been desperate to open it from the moment I found it under the floorboards. But now, staring at it in my lap, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. My grandfather had hidden this for decades. He had hidden it so well that he built an entire secret chamber beneath his cottage. What kind of secret was too dangerous to rest in the open world? I inhaled sharply and pressed my thumbs to the lock. The iron latch groaned as if it resented my intrusion. Then, click. The box shivered open. Inside was not gold, not money, not jewelry or deeds. Instead, it was filled with ash. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Not just ash, bone dust. Fragments of scorched parchment. Charred bits of fabric, blackened and brittle. Resting among them was a tiny silver locket. It gleamed faintly in the lantern's glow, the only thing inside untouched by flame. At that moment, I felt the weight of centuries press onto my chest. I reached for the locket with shaking hands. The ashes swirled around my fingers like smoke from a long dead fire. When I touched the silver, it was ice cold, far colder than the chamber. I pried it open. Inside the locket was a miniature portrait, a woman, painted in fine detail, her eyes hauntingly familiar. She looked like my mother. No, not just like her, identical. Yet the painting was old, older than my grandfather himself. My heart thudded painfully. Who was she? A folded slip of paper was pressed beneath the locket, so fragile I thought it would crumble when I touched it. Slowly, carefully, I unfolded it. The ink had faded, but I could still make out the words. The fire must never be spoken of. The ashes must remain hidden, for within them lies the truth of our name. I stared at the note until the letters blurred in my vision. A fire, a truth buried in ashes. My grandfather hadn't been guarding wealth. He had been guarding shame. Suddenly, behind me, a sound, a soft scrape of stone. I spun around, lantern swinging. The chamber was empty. Or so it seemed. I tried to shake off the fear crawling across my skin. Maybe it was just loose rubble. But the silence afterward was so total, so watchful, that it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. I turned back to the box. As I sifted through the ashes, my fingers brushed something hard, metallic. I dug deeper and pulled out a scorched signet ring. The crest was still visible, a serpent coiled around a torch. I didn't recognize it, but something about it filled me with dread. Suddenly, a voice whispered behind me, "You weren't supposed to find that." My blood froze. I whipped around, lantern flaring wildly, but the chamber was empty. No footsteps, no shadow but my own. The words still clung to the air, as if spoken by the stone walls themselves. Hours seemed to pass as I sat in that chamber, clutching the locket, the note, the ring. I thought of my grandfather, his stern face, his moments of silence, the weight he carried in his eyes. He had always seemed haunted. Was this why? I couldn't stay. I shoved the items back into the box and closed it, but the sound of the latch echoed too loudly, like the chamber didn't want it shut. My hands shook as I lifted it and hurried up the stairs, pushing the floorboards back into place. When I emerged into the cottage, dawn was breaking through the cracks of the shutters. I set the box on the table, staring at it, the ashes still clinging to my fingers. And then the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the cottage door. And share this story. Your support helps me keep uncovering these hidden truths. I stood frozen, staring at the door. No one should know I was here. This cottage had been abandoned for years. My grandfather never spoke of it. Yet someone had come, and the timing was too sharp to be coincidence. I opened the door a crack. A man stood on the step. His face was lined, weathered, but his eyes burned with the same intensity I remembered in my grandfather's. He held a walking stick, and his clothes were old-fashioned, like he had stepped out of another era. "You found it, haven't you?" he rasped. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. "Found what?" "The fire," he said. "The ashes." My chest tightened. "Who are you?" He leaned close, his breath cold against my ear. "I'm the one who buried them." And just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the mist as though he had never been there. I stumbled back inside, slamming the door, my heart pounding. None of this made sense. I sat at the table, staring at the box. I wanted to destroy it, to scatter the ashes, to rid myself of this cursed weight. But another part of me knew that if I did, I would never uncover the truth my grandfather had tried so desperately to hide. The locket, the portrait, the note, the ring. They were pieces of a puzzle, and somewhere in these ashes lay the missing part of my family's history. But whose ashes were they? And what fire could burn so brightly that generations later its shadow still lingered? The lantern guttered out, plunging the cottage into silence and darkness. And then, from the corner of the room, came a soft sound. A sigh. I wasn't alone. The box of ashes revealed a portrait of a woman identical to my mother, a note about a fire no one ever spoke of, and the sudden appearance of a stranger who claimed he buried it all. But just as I thought it was over, something else moved in the dark of the cottage. Do you think it's the ghost of the fire's victims, or someone still alive, still guarding the secret? Comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so you don't miss the next chapter. Asterisk. The lantern flame shuddered as though it sensed what I saw before my mind could even process it. There, in the corner of the room, where the shadows clung thickest, a figure stood, unmoving, silent, watching. For a moment, I thought it was a trick of the smoke, or perhaps my exhausted imagination. But then the shape shifted, weight tilting forward as if stepping closer. My skin prickled with icy sweat. I held the lantern higher, the glow licking at the darkness. A face emerged out. It was a woman. Her hair was long and matted, streaked with gray and soot. Her eyes glowed faintly in the lantern's light, wide and haunted, and yet familiar. My breath caught as I realized she bore the same sharp cheekbones and hollow eyes as the woman in the locket, the portrait. My mother's double. Who are you? I managed to whisper. My voice cracked in the silence. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she raised one finger slowly, deliberately, and pointed at the box of ashes still resting on the table. I swallowed hard, throat dry. What's in there? Whose ashes are they? Her lips parted. A voice rasped out, brittle and broken, as though carried from the grave itself. Mine. My knees buckled. I nearly dropped the lantern. Why your ashes? That's impossible. But the figure's eyes burned into me, unwavering. She stepped forward, and the smell of smoke filled the air, bitter and choking, as though the fire that had once consumed her had returned. I stumbled back against the wall, clutching the lantern in one hand, the table in the other. This isn't real. You're not real. The woman tilted her head, almost pitying. Do you think your grandfather built this cottage to live in peace? He built it to bury me. Her words sliced through me like a blade. Buried her? My grandfather, the man I had trusted, respected, loved, had buried someone beneath his own house. The box on the table rattled suddenly, as if something inside it stirred. The ashes lifted, swirling like smoke, caught in a sudden gust, spiraling upward, wrapping around the woman like a veil, and then she was gone. Just gone. The room plunged back into silence, but the box still vibrated faintly, as though mocking me. I sank into the chair, lungs burning. My mind clawed for reason. A hallucination, perhaps. Lack of sleep. Too much fear. But no, I could still smell her. The acrid smoke clung to my clothes, my hair. Her words echoed inside me. She claimed the ashes were hers. But how could ashes speak? How could a ghost point to a box? Unless my grandfather had left behind something far worse than secrets. I knew I couldn't stay in the cottage. Not after this. But as I reached for the box to hide it again, I noticed something I hadn't before. Beneath the ashes, where the locket and ring had been resting, there was a faint outline carved into the wood. A symbol, the serpent coiled around the torch. The same crest as on the ring. And next to it, carved faintly in trembling letters, the Order of Embers. A chill crawled up my spine. This wasn't just family shame. This was bigger. Some kind of society, a cult, a brotherhood my grandfather had been part of. And I had just stepped into the center of their secret. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the shutters. I tried to steady my breath, to think clearly, but then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on the gravel outside the cottage. Someone was circling the house. I snuffed the lantern instantly, plunging the room into darkness. My ears strained, following the sound. The steps paused by the window. A shadow passed across the slats. Then, a whisper. Male. Low. Dangerous. He's found it. Another voice replied, harsher. Then he cannot leave. My blood ran cold. I crouched low, clutching the box, heart hammering. Whoever they were, they knew about the ashes. They knew about me. The front door creaked slowly, as though a hand was testing it. I backed toward the stairs, clutching the box to my chest. The wood groaned under their pressure. Then, crack. The lock splintered. The door swung open. Lantern light flooded the room from outside, silhouetting two figures stepping in. Cloaked, hooded, the serpent and torch crest gleaming faintly on chains around their necks. Their faces were hidden in shadow. One of them spoke, voice deep and commanding. Return what is ours. I tightened my grip on the box. This doesn't belong to you. It belonged to my grandfather, the second figure hissed. And your grandfather was one of us, until he betrayed the order. He took her ashes to hide the truth. Now you've unearthed them. That makes you dangerous. I backed toward the stairs, every nerve on fire. Who was she? Who was the woman in the ashes? The leader stepped closer. His eyes gleamed beneath the hood. She was the spark, the flame that was meant to purify. Your grandfather destroyed her, and in doing so, destroyed us all. His words sent shivers racing down my spine. My grandfather? Destroyer of a cult? Barrier of their flame? Before I could speak again, the second man lunged. I darted up the stairs, clutching the box, lantern glass shattering behind me as their hands scraped at my back. I slammed the trapdoor shut and shoved the table over it. Gasping for breath, the cottage walls shook as fists pounded from below. Voices rose in anger, chanting in some language I didn't understand. The ashes rattled inside the box, almost violently now, as though the spirit of the woman stirred with their rage. My pulse thundered. I knew I couldn't hold them off for long, and worse, I wasn't sure if the greater danger was the men beneath the floorboards, or the ashes themselves. I ran to the window, flung it open, and hurled myself out into the night air. The box clutched to my chest. I landed hard in the dirt, scrambling to my feet. The mist swallowed me as I ran, deeper into the forest, branches clawing at my clothes. Behind me, the cottage door splintered. Shouts echoed into the night. Lanterns flared in pursuit. I stumbled through the trees, heart hammering, lungs burning. The box grew heavier in my arms, as though it resented being taken further from its resting place. Every step felt like I was dragging chains. And then I tripped. The box flew from my grasp, striking a tree root, bursting open. Ashes spilled across the forest floor, a pale plume against the black soil. From within them, a faint glow stirred. The shape of a woman's hand formed in the rising dust. And then her voice, cold, whispering, undeniable, "You can't run from fire." And just like that, in the forest, the ashes themselves began to rise, shaping into the woman who claimed she was buried by my grandfather. But with the cult closing in behind me, I had no choice but to face both the living and the dead. What would you do if you were me? Would you trust the spirit or fight it? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because in the next chapter, the truth will burn brighter than ever. The ashes drifted upward, caught in a wind that didn't exist. They swirled in tight circles, glowing faintly, before knitting together into the outline of a figure. My breath snagged in my throat. The shape became more defined slender arms, a flowing shroud, hair tumbling like smoke, and then the face formed. The same hollow-eyed woman who had appeared in the cottage now hovered before me, her body woven from soot and embers. She was both beautiful and terrifying, her expression unreadable, her presence suffocating. Behind me, lanterns bobbed in the distance. The cultists were still chasing, their voices chanting in that strange tone, drawing nearer. I should have run. I should have fled deeper into the trees, dropped everything and vanished into the dark. But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. The woman, if she even was a woman, tilted her head, eyes boring into me. Then she spoke. "You've carried me far enough." Her voice wasn't a whisper this time. It was a command, echoing like fire cracking wood. I forced words through my dry throat. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" She reached out, her smoky hand brushing my chest. The cold seared through my shirt, burning like ice and fire at once. "I want what was stolen. I want to finish what your grandfather tried to end." My grandfather, I swallowed, feeling her touch spread through my ribs. "He said nothing about you. Nothing about this." Her eyes narrowed, flickers of flame dancing in her irises. "Of course he didn't. He feared me. He feared the truth." The crunch of boots broke the moment. I glanced over my shoulder. The cloaked figures had entered the clearing, lantern light cutting through the fog. There! One of them shouted. "He's awakened her." The woman's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. they would see me bound again. But you, her hand pressed harder against my chest, you are of his blood. You can set me free. The words sliced through me. I shook my head violently. No, I don't even know who you are, what you are. The cultists fanned out, surrounding the clearing. One raised a dagger that gleamed with symbols etched along the blade. The leader shouted, "Step away from her. She is not yours to command." The ash woman hissed, smoke coiling from her mouth. They bound me once, but fire cannot be buried forever. And with that, she raised her arms. The ashes scattered from the ground, whipping upward in a violent storm. Dirt and leaves tore into the air, the clearing exploding into chaos. The cultists staggered, shielding their faces from the burning grit. I stumbled too, caught in the storm, vision stinging, lungs choking. But through the maelstrom, I saw her towering above them all, her body now blazing with ember light, more flame than flesh. One of the cultists lunged toward her, dagger raised. She caught his wrist mid-swing. His scream ripped through the forest as his flesh blackened instantly, crumbling to ash that joined her swirling body. I staggered back in horror. She wasn't just smoke. She consumed. The other cultists shouted, rallying. One hurled a chain marked with the serpent crest. It crackled with strange energy, glowing like molten iron. It wrapped around her form, sizzling as it touched. She shrieked, the sound piercing my skull. For a moment, the storm faltered, the embers dimming. The leader barked, "Hold her." A son of his blood must not complete the rite. His eyes locked on me, my stomach dropped. They think I can release her. The leader raised his dagger and pointed it at me. Take him alive. The cultists lunged. I bolted. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Branches whipped my face as I crashed through the underbrush. Behind me, the storm of ashes flared again, the woman roaring as the chains strained against her. But the cultists didn't stop. Two broke off and gave chase. My lungs burned as I sprinted, feet slipping on moss and mud. The forest tilted, ground sloping downward. I stumbled, nearly tumbling headlong, then burst out into a ravine where moonlight glistened off a shallow stream. The water. Instinct told me it was safer than fire, safer than ashes. I splashed into the stream, the icy water soaking through my clothes. I stumbled downstream, praying the sound would cover my tracks. For a moment, it worked. The forest behind me went quiet, except for the woman's distant shrieks and the cults shouting. But then a voice hissed just above me. "You cannot run forever." I froze. Slowly, I lifted my gaze. The leader stood on the ridge, silhouetted against the moon. His dagger gleamed, and behind him, lanterns flickered as the others closed in. My heart pounded. I crouched lower in the stream, gripping the nearest rock like it could shield me. The leader's voice carried down to me. "Do you know what your grandfather did? Do you know why he locked her away?" I said nothing, but my silence was answer enough. "He killed her," the man said, tone almost reverent, "because he feared her power. But he was too weak to destroy her completely. So he trapped her ashes, cursed her soul, and ran from the fire he himself had lit." My throat tightened. Killed her? Trapped her? And now I was holding the consequences? The leader's eyes gleamed. "You can end her, or you can unleash her. Your blood is the key. Choose, before she consumes us all." I barely had time to process before the air behind him erupted in light. The woman had broken the chains. Her body was a column of flame now, her scream shaking the trees. She surged forward, scattering the cultists like dry leaves. The leader stumbled, dagger flashing in the light. The forest roared with fire, and in the center of it, her eyes found mine again. Choose blood of his blood. Set me free or burn with them. In that moment, surrounded by fire, cultists, and the ghost of a woman my grandfather may have murdered, I realized the choice wasn't just about survival. It was about legacy. Should I trust her and unleash her power, or stand with the men who hunted me? What would you choose? Tell me in the comments. And stay with me, because in the next chapter, the fire decides for me. Asterisk, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The ash woman, her form swaying like a figure sculpted from smoke and ember, stood only a few paces away. The ruined diary page in my trembling hand still bore the words, "Choose, or the fire will choose for you." The glow of the candlelight reflected in her hollow, coal-bright eyes. Behind her, the cabin walls groaned as if they too knew that something terrible was about to be unleashed. The forest outside was utterly silent. No birds, no wind, no rustling of leaves. Only the faint smell of smoke creeping under the door. My grandfather's chest, still cracked open, seemed almost to pulse with its own heat, as though it too were tied to the growing storm outside. I swallowed hard. What happens if I don't? I whispered. The ash woman tilted her head. Ash fell from her shoulders like burned paper crumbling. Then fire consumes all, she said, her voice echoing in a strange harmony, part human, part something older. Family, home, memory. Choice is mercy. Delay is destruction. A sudden knock rattled the cabin door. I froze. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. Who's there? I croaked. The ash woman did not move. Another knock. Then a voice, muffled, but familiar. It's me. Open up. I recognized it instantly. My uncle. The same uncle my grandfather had warned me never to trust. The same man who had always hovered near the inheritance, scheming, whispering. But how had he found me here? I turned back to the ash woman, but she had vanished. Only drifting embers hung in the air where she'd been. The knocks grew louder, impatient. Then the door handle rattled. I know you're in there. Open this door before I break it down. I had barely enough time to shove the diary page back into my pocket before the door slammed inward, and there he was, face leaner than I remembered, eyes shining with something unhinged. He smelled of smoke and whiskey. So it's true, he muttered, stepping into the cabin, gaze snapping to the glowing chest. He left it for you. But it's mine. All of it. I'll take it, even if the fire takes us too. Before I could react, he lunged for the chest. The moment his hands touched it, the entire cabin shuddered. A sound like a roar of 1,000 flames filled the air, and suddenly the walls themselves caught fire. The window panes cracked, fire licking the glass from outside. The forest had ignited. My uncle screamed, yanking his hands away as blisters bubbled across his palms. He stumbled backward, staring at me with a mix of hatred and terror. What did you do? The ash woman appeared again, this time inside the flames themselves. Her body stretched tall, her coal eyes burning like molten stone. I warned you, she intoned. The fire decides. The roof beams above us crackled, raining sparks onto the wooden floor. My chest heaved as heat wrapped around me. Smoke burned my throat, but through the chaos, I noticed something strange. The fire was not spreading randomly. It was moving with purpose, circling, forming a spiral around me, and the chest. My uncle tried to run, but the flames curved and blocked his path, forcing him back toward me. He looked at me, his face slick with sweat, his voice trembling. Do something. You're the favorite, aren't you? You always were. The ash woman's ember hand reached out toward me. One last chance. Choose what will burn and what will endure. The spiral of fire tightened. I could barely see through the smoke, but I knew with a horrible certainty. This was the moment my grandfather had prepared me for. This was the trial buried in his chest. My uncle fell to his knees, coughing, eyes wild. Save me, or we both die. The diary page in my pocket seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Choose, or the fire will choose for you. I shut my eyes, the roar of flames pressing in, the heat unbearable. My mind raced memories of my grandfather's stern but loving eyes, his warnings about greed, his insistence that truth mattered more than wealth. When I opened my eyes, the ash woman was waiting. The fire's spiral had tightened into a blazing circle, and at its center stood only me, the chest, and the man who had betrayed everything. My throat was dry, but I forced the words out anyway. I choose. The fire surged upward in a column of golden flame, swallowing my words, swallowing the cabin, swallowing everything. And then silence. What did the protagonist choose, and what price will that choice demand? Did the fire consume his uncle, the inheritance, or something far greater? The answer lies in the next chapter. Stay with me, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment what you think burned that night. Because the fire is only beginning. Asterisk, when the fire came, it did not come as flame alone. It came as a storm. One moment, I stood with the diary page burning hot in my pocket, the chest glowing like molten gold at my side, and my uncle screaming in the smoke. The next, the roof of the cabin tore away in a single blast of heat, and the forest outside shrieked as though 1,000 voices cried in unison. I tried to shout my choice, but the fire devoured my words, turning them into nothing but sparks. The ash woman towered in the center of the inferno, her body shimmering between smoke and flesh, coal and memory. She lifted her ember hand and pointed directly at me. You chose. But the fire will test it. The walls collapsed, and then darkness. When I opened my eyes, it was dawn. The sky above was painted with ash-gray clouds streaked orange, as if the fire had stained even the heavens. I lay in the middle of a blackened clearing, the trees around me reduced to smoldering skeletons. My lungs burned with every breath, and my skin was caked in soot. But I was alive. I sat up, coughing violently. My clothes were scorched, my hands blistered, but somehow my body had been spared the full force of the blaze. Around me the earth steamed. The fire hadn't spread randomly. It had carved a perfect circle in the woods, a ring of charred ground enclosing me like a mark. And there, not far from where I had fallen, lay the chest, unburned, untouched. The wood grain gleamed as though freshly polished. Beside it lay something else. My uncle. His body was crumpled, his face pale and streaked with soot. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he was dead. But then his chest rose in a shallow breath. Alive, but broken. His hands, those greedy hands that had reached for the chest, were blistered to ruin, twisted like melted wax. I crawled toward him, my own body trembling. His eyes fluttered open, wild with fever. You cursed me. He rasped. No, I whispered, my throat raw. You cursed yourself. His gaze flicked to the chest, and for a moment, even half dead, I saw the same hunger in him. That hunger hadn't burned away. If anything, it had grown sharper. The ash woman's voice lingered in my mind. Choose what will burn, and what will endure. I turned back to the chest. Its lid was cracked, glowing faintly. Smoke curled from the gap, but not the smoke of fire sweet, fragrant, almost like incense. Carefully, I reached for it. The wood was cool under my fingers. The hinges groaned as I lifted the lid. Inside was not treasure. Not gold, not jewels, not deeds to land. It was filled with ashes. My heart sank. A box of ashes? After all the warnings, all the danger, all the sacrifices, was this all my grandfather had left me? But then I saw it. Nestled within the ashes, half buried, was a small metal locket. I pulled it free, brushing away the soot. The front bore a symbol I had never seen before: 2 interlocked circles, crossed by a line of fire. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph, faded with time. A man and a woman standing together in front of the old farmhouse. The man was unmistakable. My grandfather, younger, eyes full of a fierce, almost defiant light. The woman was not my grandmother. My pulse hammered in my ears. Who was she? Beneath the photo, etched into the inner surface of the locket, were words so small I had to squint to read them. The truth is not in wealth, but in blood. Guard it or burn with it. I snapped the locket shut, my heart pounding. Blood. Did this mean the fire was not about inheritance of property, but inheritance of family? Of lineage? A low groan dragged me back to reality. My uncle was trying to move, his blistered hands clawing weakly at the ground. His gaze burned into me. "Give me the chest," he croaked. I shook my head. "It's not yours to take." His voice cracked with rage. Everything he had, everything, was mine by right. He tried to crawl forward, but collapsed in the ash. I stood, clutching the locket tight. The fire had taken much, but it had spared me this proof of something deeper, something my grandfather wanted hidden, until the flames themselves revealed it. As I looked out over the burned clearing, I realized the ash woman was gone. But her presence lingered, woven into the silence of the smoldering earth. This was not the end of the trial. It was only the beginning. I dragged myself and the chest from the clearing, my body screaming with every step. Behind me, the smoke rose like a signal, visible for miles. Someone would come. They would ask questions. About the fire. About me. About him. But how could I tell them the truth when I barely understood it myself? At the edge of the clearing, I looked back one last time. My uncle was still lying in the ashes, too weak to follow. His eyes burned into me, hatred and desperation bound together. "You'll regret it," he whispered. His voice carried on the wind. "The fire doesn't end with you." I stumbled back toward the old road, the chest heavy in my hands, the locket burning in my pocket like a brand. My grandfather's secrets weren't finished. The fire had chosen. Yes, but what it had chosen to reveal was far more dangerous than I had imagined. And I knew then, the next time the fire came, it wouldn't just test me. It would test everyone. What truth did the locket really hold about the family's bloodline? Why did my grandfather hide a different woman in his legacy? And what does it mean for me? The ashes revealed one secret, but even greater ones are waiting in the shadows. Stay tuned, subscribe, like, share, and comment what you think the fire will reveal next. Because the real inheritance has only begun. Asterisk. The road out of the burned clearing stretched before me like a scar through the woods. My arms trembled from carrying the chest, its weight far heavier than wood and ash should allow. Every step ground soot deeper into my skin, every breath drew smoke into my lungs. Yet it wasn't the weight of the chest or the pain of my body that burdened me most. It was the locket in my pocket. Could still feel the engraving against my fingers when I touched it. The truth is not in wealth, but in blood. Those words repeated in my mind, like the steady toll of a bell. By the time I reached the first cluster of houses, old wooden cottages, at the edge of the village, the sun had climbed high. The villagers were already gathered outside, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on the thick column of smoke rising from the forest. "Fire," one of them muttered as I passed, my clothes torn, my face black with soot. "It's burned half the ridge." Another whispered. He came out of it, alone. Their stares prickled against me. I kept my head low, clutching the chest tighter. It wasn't time to answer questions. Not yet. Asterisk. At the inn, the keeper gave me a room without protest. Perhaps he thought me mad, stumbling in covered in ash, with a chest I refused to let out of sight. Perhaps he pitied me. I didn't care. I collapsed onto the bed, the chest against my side. the locket clutched in my blistered palm. I awoke to the sound of voices in the hall. Low, urgent. Swore it was deliberate. Someone said it. That man, the one who came back. He was seen dragging something through the ashes. Best tell the constable before more burns. My stomach tightened. Rumors already. If I stayed, the questions would grow sharper. But the locket's photograph gave me a direction, a purpose. The woman standing beside my grandfather, the woman no one had spoken of, was the key. I lit the oil lamp on the bedside table and studied the picture again. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, her hair dark and coiled around her shoulders. Not a farmwife's dressed something finer, though worn. And behind them, the farmhouse I had known since childhood. This wasn't just a stranger. This was someone who had lived in the shadows of my family, erased from the stories I'd been told. I slipped the locket back into my pocket, gathered the chest, and left the inn under the cover of night. On the road, my mind wandered to my uncle. I had left him in the ashes, alive but broken. Yet I knew his hunger wouldn't die with his strength. He would come for me again, crawling out of the ruins if he had to. The chest was his obsession, and now the locket would be too. Once he learned what I carried, the fire had scarred the land, but its true scar was inside us. The first lead came from the village church. I approached its stone steps cautiously, the dawn just breaking behind the spire. The priest, an old man with a bent back, was sweeping the porch when I arrived. He looked up at me with narrowed eyes. "You were at the fire," he said simply. I nodded. "I need answers. About my grandfather. About a woman he once knew." He frowned, studying me. When I showed him the photograph in the locket, his hand stilled on the broom. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then softly, "You should not have found this." My chest tightened. "You knew her?" His gaze flicked to the sky as if searching for strength. All in this village knew her. She was called Elena, but most tried to forget. Elena, the name itself carried a weight, as though it had been buried in ash, and now uncovered, raw and sharp. What happened to her? I asked that the priest's face darkened. "She burned." The word struck like a hammer blow. "Burned?" He nodded slowly. "The farmhouse, many years ago. Your grandfather saved what he could, but not her. Or so the story goes." My blood ran cold. The farmhouse. The fire. Another fire before this one. The pattern was too strong to ignore. But why, I pressed, would he keep her picture? Why leave me this locket? The priest's eyes softened, though his voice dropped to a warning whisper. "Because her blood still runs in you. Elena was not only your grandfather's secret. She was your bloodline's truth." My breath caught. My bloodline. The words etched inside the locket burned in my mind again. The truth is not in wealth, but in blood. I staggered back, my mind spinning. If Elena was my bloodline, then everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. I left the church trembling, my thoughts in chaos. But clarity came as I reached the road again. My grandfather had tried to bury Elena's memory, but he had also ensured I would find her in fire and ash. This wasn't coincidence. It was design. The ash woman, the trials, the chest, all of it tied to her. To Elena Dot, and if Elena's blood still ran in me, then my uncle's hatred would only deepen. Because it meant I had something he could never claim. That night, as I camped by the road, I dreamed. The fire raged around me again, but this time I saw Elena in its heart. She looked exactly as she did in the photograph, alive, her dark hair catching the light of the flames. She spoke without moving her lips. Guard it or burn with it. I woke with a start, sweat soaking my skin. The chest pulsed faintly beside me, as though a live dot, my choice, had brought me here. But the fire had not finished deciding. The next day, a rider came down the road as I walked. His horse was lathered with sweat, his face pale with fear. He slowed only long enough to cry out, "The man from the fire, the uncle he lives. He's gone to the constable. He swears you lit the flames." And then he was gone, galloping into the distance. The weight of it sank into me. My uncle had turned the law against me. Soon I would not just be hunted by family, but by strangers who knew nothing of the truth. I pressed the locket to my chest, whispering Alana's name into the wind. If blood was the true inheritance, then I had no choice but to uncover it all before fire, or law, or hatred consumed me. That night, as the moon rose silver over the darkened fields, I stood at a crossroads. One road led deeper into the countryside, toward the village archives where Elena's name might still exist in forgotten records. The other led back toward the smoldering ruins of the farmhouse, where the truth had once burned and perhaps still smoldered. The chest was heavy, the locket heavier, but the heaviest weight of all was the secret that I now carried in my veins. And behind me, always, I felt the eyes of the fire watching. Who was Elena, and what truth about my bloodline did my grandfather try to hide in flames? Why does the fire keep returning to reveal what others buried? The answers lie ahead, but so does betrayal. Stay with me, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your theory. Because the hidden bloodline has only begun to speak. Asterisk, when all the dust of betrayal, fire, and secrets finally settled, one truth shone brighter than any hidden gold or ancient chest. Family is built on trust, not blood alone. The locked chest wasn't about wealth. It was about revealing the mistakes, sacrifices, and hidden struggles of the past so the next generation could learn. My grandfather's greatest gift wasn't money, but the lesson that truth heals. While lies burn everything to ash dot, no inheritance can replace honesty. No secret can stay buried forever, and no betrayal can survive the light of truth. So, if you carry secrets or grudges in your family, remember this story. Only when we open the locked chests of our hearts can healing begin. If you were moved by this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Tell us, what did this story teach you about family and trust? Your comment might inspire someone else today.